They say the worst betrayals come from the people you hand the knife to. Me? I handed her the whole drawer. It was 9:12 a.m. when the call came in. I remember the time because I was on my second coffee and halfway through prepping the quarterly numbers, the same numbers that had turned her boutique agency into an empire. The same numbers that made investors lean forward, eyes gleaming with dollar signs. I was in the office early, like always. Punctual, loyal, focused. And then the phone rang. "Hey, Han," she said, voice smooth like silk wrapped around a blade. It was odd. She never called me during work hours. Not unless she needed something an extra hand at her sister's fundraiser, help finding a lost dog she'd forgotten to feed, or a reminder to reorder those overpriced pressed juices she couldn't live without. But this time was different. She didn't even say my name. "We're downsizing," she said bluntly. "Today's your last day. HR will send over the papers. Unless," I could hear her smirking, "you'd like to stay on as a cleaner." Then laughter. Her and her sister, Candace, cackling like they were teenagers who just pulled off the world's cruelest prank. I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at the skyline through the office window, the city stretching out in every direction, tall and uncaring. Just like her. "You there?" she asked, tone already bored. "Oh, and don't bother coming home. We've changed the locks. The dog's staying. My lawyer says it's better this way." That's when I heard it, the faintest click of her heels as she turned away from the phone, already done with me like I was some disposable intern. Someone to be discarded and forgotten. That sound. I'll never forget it. The sound of my life, my marriage, my dignity being boxed up and tossed out like trash. I took a deep breath. Then I smiled. "Thanks for the great offer," I said, calmly. Then I hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't march into her office like some broken man begging for answers. No, that's what she expected. And I never give people what they expect. Instead, I sat there, alone in the office I helped build, silent, still, and burning. They say betrayal is like a storm. It tears through everything you thought was stable. But what they forget to mention is that storms clear the air. They reveal what's been rotting underneath. Turns out, my wife had been rotting for years. The affair? Obvious now. The sudden work trips. The hours that didn't add up. The girls' weekends that coincided with hotel charges and Uber rides in cities she swore she wasn't in. And Candace, always the whisper in her ear, the devil on her shoulder. Together, they decided to erase me. Like I was a line item on a spreadsheet they could delete and never think about again. What they didn't know, what they never understood, was that while they were busy playing small games, I was building something real. Not just for them, but in spite of them. 3 years ago, I started consulting for a competitor. Just casual at first. A few pointers here and there. It was untraceable, confidential, off books. A ghost in the machine. That competitor? Graham Lennox. Her worst nightmare. And in 3 days, I'd be sitting in a conference room with Graham, negotiating the final terms of a merger worth $950 million. A merger that would crush her boutique agency like a bug on the windshield. The irony? She'd be in that room too. Because Graham didn't tell her he brought in a new senior strategist. Me. And she hadn't seen anything yet. The day I left her office, the one I helped design, right down to the minimalist walnut shelves and the art she pretended to understand, no one stopped me. Not the receptionist I'd bought birthday cupcakes for 2 years in a row. Not the junior designer I mentored when she cried in the break room after a client berated her. Not even the intern whose resume I'd rewritten from scratch because her college career center fed her garbage advice. They all looked the other way. Cowards and business casual. I walked out without a word. No suitcase, no box full of desk trinkets. Just my phone, my name, and a rising certainty in my gut. I'd been the scaffolding they built their lives on. And they were about to learn what happened when the scaffolding walked away. I didn't go home. Why would I? Home was now a showroom where betrayal slept in imported sheets and locked its doors against the man who paid for them. Instead, I went to the one place Candace and my wife, let's just call her the director from now on, never cared to understand, the server farm. While they were hosting champagne-drenched brainstorming sessions with buzzwords and PowerPoint nonsense, I was backing up terabytes of client data, old invoices, and IP filings. The kind of stuff they never even knew existed. Let me be clear, I didn't steal anything. I protected what I created. You see, I built that agency's backbone, branding strategy, algorithmic targeting, automation workflows, you name it. They just slapped their names on the pitch decks. So while they toasted my departure with sparkling rose and self-congratulations, I was already 5 moves ahead. By the time HR processed my termination paperwork, my resume was landing on desks that mattered. Real power. Not the illusion of it. That's when Graham called. "You still interested in watching the empire fall?" he asked. His voice always had this dry, British bite, like someone who knew exactly what a well-timed collapse looked like. "More than ever," I replied. "What do you need?" "Your eyes, your brain, and that ruthless sense of timing I've always admired." And just like that, I was back in the game, only now, I was playing from the shadows. We didn't schedule meetings. We didn't announce partnerships. This was a ghost operation. He gave me access to everything: financials, client rosters, competitor analysis. I gave him the one thing he couldn't buy: insight into the chaos brewing inside my former house of cards. Because guess what? They were already slipping. Candace had convinced the director to pivot the agency toward luxury crypto campaigns. She didn't understand crypto. She barely understood Google Calendar. But she saw dollar signs, and Candace sold her the dream. I saw the proposal. It was pathetic: fluff, jargon, and a 5-year projection based on TikTok trends and vibes. Their pitch to investors looked like it was written by a hungover intern. And somehow, they got a bite. One key investor. Linux Holdings. Yep, Graham's shell company. We funded the dream they thought was theirs. We inflated their hopes. We built them up, just enough to make the fall hurt. And then, in a stroke of poetic justice only the gods of betrayal could appreciate, we scheduled the meeting. The one where their empire was supposed to go global. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Because that was the meeting where my soon-to-be ex-wife, the director, the queen of cruelty herself, was going to walk into a glass-walled boardroom and see me sitting next to her worst competitor. And she'd smile. For a second. Until she realized I wasn't there to shake her hand. It was a Thursday, because of course it was. Thursdays always have that smug, almost Friday energy. The kind of day where people loosen their ties just enough to underestimate you. The boardroom was cold. Not metaphorically. The AC was actually too high, but no one dared say anything. That's how Graham liked it. Keeps people alert, slightly uncomfortable. Makes them mistake unease for intimidation. We were seated already. Graham to my right, 2 of his executive directors across from us. All of them knew the plan, knew the game. But me? I was the wild card. The one face no one expected to see at this table. And then the glass door opened. She walked in, radiant in that calculated way. Designer heels, tailored ivory suit, the power lipstick red shade she only wore for deals she was sure she'd win. Her hair was swept back in a tight bun, sharp as the smirk on her face. Candace followed behind like a loyal shadow, all fake charm and polished teeth. Then her eyes met mine. It took exactly 2.6 seconds. Yes, I counted, for her expression to crack. She blinked once. Then again. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Graham stood and extended a hand. "Miss Calloway, welcome. So glad you could join us." Candace was already scanning the room, eyes darting between me and the documents on the table. She knew something was wrong. She just couldn't see how bad it was yet. The director recovered quickly, I'll give her that. She smiled, but it was the wrong kind. Tight. Shaky. Like someone walking across a frozen lake who just heard the ice groan beneath their heels. "I didn't realize. You were consulting for Mr. Lennox," she said, finally finding her voice. "Oh, I'm not consulting," I said, calm as moonlight. "I'm leading the acquisition team." Silence. Graham grinned, wolf-like. Bit of a twist, isn't it? She started, but nothing came out that didn't taste like fear. Let me explain something about my ex-wife. She wasn't built for surprise. She was built for scripts, for stage direction. She controlled narratives, curated her own mythology. Everything she did was part of a performance. But this wasn't in her script. She sat down slowly, like her legs might give out. Candace stayed standing, arms crossed, glaring at me like I'd spat on the family crest. "What exactly is this meeting about?" she snapped. Graham leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "A full takeover. Absorption of your client list, your personnel, your assets. You'll retain your brand name for a while, but we'll own it. All of it." The director's voice dropped. "You can't do that." Graham gestured toward me. "He built it. We're just claiming what was already ours." She turned to me then, eyes blazing. "You're doing this out of spite," she hissed. "No," I said. "I'm doing it out of principle. Spite was free. This is the invoice." She blinked, stunned again. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the voicemail. The laughter. Stay on as a cleaner, she'd said. And now, here she was, drowning in the very deal she thought would crown her. But the real moment? The moment I'd carved into memory like initials into wet cement? It was when Graham handed her the folder. The revised financials, he said. You'll want to read this closely. She opened it, and there it was. The name of the new COO of the restructured agency. Her former husband. Me. Her hands trembled. Candace leaned in, read it over her shoulder, and let out a noise between a gasp and a curse. You son of a... Careful, I warned. We're still in a professional setting. For now. Graham chuckled. Shall we break for espresso? She didn't respond. She was too busy watching the throne crumble beneath her. You ever watch someone realize they don't own their legacy? It's beautiful. She sat there, my wife, the director, who once threw out the man who built her brand like last season's handbag, staring at a title page with my name at the top. Cool. Chief Operating Officer of the company, she thought she'd kicked me out of for good. And the best part? She signed off on it. See, what Candace and her failed to grasp was this. Details are everything. When we launched the company, they didn't understand contracts, equity splits, or vesting schedules. They wanted to run a business, but they treated the fine print like background noise. Me? I am the fine print. She wanted my name removed from the board 3 months ago. Funny how they never noticed the tiny clause buried in the founding documents. Any change to executive structure requires full board review and a minimum 90-day challenge window. Guess who filed a board challenge the day she fired me? And guess who quietly picked up 6% of voting stock through shell purchases after she diluted her shares to fund that crypto marketing scam? You guessed it. I wasn't just the former husband walking back into the room. I was a controlling stakeholder with full voting rights. And today wasn't the day she lost her title. That's coming. No, today was the day she learned how she'd lose it. Publicly. Irrevocably. Let's talk rebrand, I said, flipping open my own folder. Candace scoffed. You don't get to touch the brand. That's ours. No, Graham replied. It was yours. You sold 41% of the agency to investors last quarter. Another 17% went to bridge the crypto debt. That leaves you with, what, 8%? Hardly controlling interest. You liar, she hissed. No, I said calm. I'm just better at reading spreadsheets than you are. I slid a document across the table. Her eyes darted across the lines, watching her power evaporate in ink and numbers. She looked up, eyes not pleading, not furious. Just lost. Good. I remember what it felt like to be locked out of my own house. The way my knuckles throbbed after I pounded on the front door, only to realize she was home, listening, laughing, probably. I slept in my car that night. She never asked. But now she was locked out of something I built. And I was done knocking. I'll let you stay on, I said. Title, Creative Advisor. It's honorary. No decision-making power. But hey, it'll look good on LinkedIn. Candace lunged halfway out of her chair before Graham raised a hand. I wouldn't, he said. There's still that matter of the SEC audit we've opened on your investment fund. Would hate for emotions to complicate things. She sat down fast. My wife looked at me like she didn't recognize me. And maybe she didn't. Because the man who once begged for her attention, the man who covered her startup debts, proofread her speeches, cheered her on while she climbed higher, was gone. This version burned the pedestal and built a throne from the ashes. I'll give you both a few days to think, I said, standing. But make no mistake, this isn't a negotiation. This is me being polite. Graham stood beside me, amused. The room spun for her. I could see it. The air was getting thin now. Not because she'd been caught. No, the worst part was realizing that this had been building under her nose the whole time. Every smile, every nod, every silent, patient step. I hope the view was worth it, I said. Because the fall's gonna be spectacular. I walked out without looking back. But I wasn't done. The real surprise? It wasn't the company, or the title, or the chair I'd just pulled out from under her. It was what she owned that was about to implode. The next morning, I sat in a quiet cafe with a hot Americano, a flash drive in my pocket, and the calm of a man who no longer had to pretend. Across from me sat Elizabeth Tran, my lawyer. And not just any lawyer. Elizabeth was the kind of attorney who could turn a prenup into a weapon of mass destruction. She wore her hair in a tight bun, glasses low on her nose, and her voice? Measured. Surgical. I've reviewed the document, she said. The original prenup she insisted you sign. I nodded, sipping my coffee. Let me guess, it protects her, right? Elizabeth smiled. Oh, she thought it did. But that's the problem with do-it-yourself legal templates. They forget to read the boilerplate. She slid the copy across the table. Page 7, paragraph 4, subsection C. In the event of infidelity by the beneficiary party, all shared assets revert to the non-breaching spouse unless amended in writing. I blinked. You're kidding. She signed it. Her lawyer was her college roommate. Probably thought infidelity was too hard to prove. And Elizabeth tapped the flash drive. Photos, emails, hotel bills, all time-stamped. Your former friend, the one with the jawline and zero impulse control? He was very helpful, especially once I reminded him that aiding in the breach of contract opens him to civil liability. I smiled. Slow. Cold. You see, my wife, the director, was smart. But she was also arrogant. She thought charm could overwrite consequence, that no one would look past the polish. She forgot that polish fades. Paper doesn't. Elizabeth continued. You'll get the condo, the vehicles, the majority of your joint investments. The company stock? That stays with you. What about her? I asked, not that I cared. She'll keep her personal belongings. Jewelry. A few accounts, unless she wants to contest. But she won't. Why? Elizabeth leaned back. Because the minute she contests, she held up the flash drive, becomes a public court document. She'd go from the visionary director to the woman who slept her way into a lawsuit. And the best part? I asked. Elizabeth smiled like a cat who just caught a very rich mouse. You don't have to say a word. Just sign, and let the system do the rest. I signed. Simple. Clean. Final. The divorce would be filed quietly. No press, no drama, just a whisper campaign of financial disaster, career instability, and a brand that couldn't outrun its founder's scandal. Investors would retreat. Sponsors would vanish. And suddenly, every networking event would feel cold. But the cherry on top? The email. A single line. Sent from my personal account to hers, titled, Friendly Reminder. I always liked being the cleaner, especially when it came to taking out the trash. No response. Of course not. But I knew she read it. You can always tell when someone reads a message not meant for them to survive. His name was Mason Grant. A name that sounds like a cologne ad or a trust fund baby who took a gap year to find himself in Santorini. In reality, he was a mid-level strategic consultant with a six-pack, a podcast, and not a single original thought in his head. But he had one thing going for him. He was convenient. And for my wife, that was enough. She met him during a tech summit in Napa. I remember because I paid for the trip. She said she needed time to network, to reconnect with industry peers. Turns out, what she really needed was a hotel suite and someone too stupid to ask questions. At first, I thought Mason was just a symptom, a fling. But then he started showing up in her company Slack messages, listed under vague calendar events, invited to pitch meetings he had no business attending. He wasn't just the affair. He was the upgrade she thought she was trading up to. A few months ago, she pitched him as a contract asset manager. Said he had great instincts and a fresh take. She even asked me to vet him for internal systems access. I said sure. Set up his access myself. And in doing so, I watched everything. Every document he opened. Every file he downloaded. Every internal message he sent to her, where he called me old blood, in the way, and easy to outmaneuver. And I waited. Because sometimes, the most poetic revenge is just letting someone hang themselves with their own rope. So after the boardroom takedown and the prenup checkmate, I had one final errand to run. I met Mason at his gym. Not because I couldn't call, but because I wanted to see the look on his perfectly stubbled face when I delivered the news. He came out of the locker room, protein shake in hand, faked in slightly uneven, like a Ken doll left out in the sun too long. Hey, man, he said, all teeth and casual arrogance. What's up? I handed him an envelope. He opened it, and the smile dropped faster than his resting heart rate. What is this? That, I said, is a cease and desist for IP theft, client interference, and corporate espionage. You're kidding. No. But I'd keep reading. There's also a personal restraining order request in there. Oh, and a formal complaint filed with your licensing board. He went pale. This is insane. I didn't do anything illegal. I leaned in, calm, measured. No, Mason. You did something stupid. You logged into systems you weren't authorized to access. You shared confidential strategy documents with someone you were sleeping with. You sent emails on a corporate account that I had admin rights over. I shrugged. And then you called me a has-been, which hurt. But not as much as it's about to hurt when every agency in the city knows your name for the wrong reasons. He tried to speak, but no words came. Only shallow breaths and regret. I stepped back. Oh, and one last thing, I added. That podcast episode you recorded trashing me anonymously? You forgot to scrub the metadata. Uploaded from your home IP. Rookie mistake. He blinked. You listened to that? I produced it. And then I walked away, leaving him there sweating, stunned, and very, very unemployed. 3 days after the gym showdown, I got a call from a name I hadn't seen in years, Vanessa Torres. She used to work for us. Creative director. Brilliant. Dedicated. The kind of person who stayed late not because she was told to, but because she cared. She left abruptly one afternoon a year ago. No notice. No goodbye. Just a resignation email and a silence I always felt was off. Vanessa, I said when I answered. Yeah, she replied. I heard through the grapevine about Mason, about the agency. About her. My throat tightened. You okay? There was a pause. Then a voice that had been burned before. I wasn't. But now? I want in. See, what my wife, the self-appointed queen of corporate cruelty, didn't realize was that every empire leaves a trail of bodies. Vanessa was one of them. So was Arjun, our first IT lead who mysteriously got laid off after a disagreement over ethical data use. So was Lisbeth, the one who got iced out after proposing a strategy Candace later repurposed as her own. These weren't random career hiccups. They were casualties. Of ego. Of ambition without ethics. Of people who got in the way of the vision. And now they were all reaching out. I didn't even have to ask. They came with receipts. Emails. Recordings. NDAs that had long expired. Testimonies of wage theft, toxic meetings, and predatory bonuses that rewarded sabotage over substance. One file from Vanessa? A direct Slack message from my wife telling her to cut that girl from the pitch. She's too smart, and I don't need competition. Another? A financial spreadsheet Candace altered to hide unreported equity disbursements and route funds through shell vendors Mason had consulted for. The real kicker? An internal memo. Timestamped. Authored by the director herself. If we can pin this on Mason, no one will trace it back to us. Spin it. Leak it if we have to. Just clean house. She was already planning her exit strategy. A betrayal inside a betrayal. She was going to let Mason take the fall for a storm she helped create, and all while still sleeping with him. Beautiful. So I took everything. Cross-referenced it. Verified it. Wrapped it in a pretty bow of evidence so undeniable even her reflection would flinch. Then I made 2 moves. First, I sent an anonymous dossier to the biggest client she hadn't yet lost. You know the type, old money, legacy brand, deeply allergic to scandal. They dropped her within 24 hours. Second, I scheduled a press leak. Just a nudge, 1 email, 1 file, 1 source close to the matter. The headline? Creative Empire Implodes Under Ethics Probe. CEO Silent Amidst Fraud Allegations. She went quiet after that. No public statement. No social posts. No smug selfies in boardrooms. Just silence. But that's the thing about silence. When it comes after a roar, people notice. Especially shareholders. And suddenly, everyone was asking the same question. Where's the director? There are betrayals that shatter your heart. And then there are betrayals that shatter your blueprint, the design you thought your life was built on. Meet Jared, my younger brother. Golden boy. Always smiling. Always, just here to help. The kind of guy who brings beer to barbecues he didn't help plan, tells stories louder than necessary, and somehow ends up in every group photo even when no one remembers inviting him. Growing up, he lived in my shadow. I didn't try to put him there. He just never bothered to climb out. Failed startups, half-finished degrees, jobs that disappeared when accountability knocked. But hey, he had charm. Charisma. People liked him. Especially my wife. I never saw it then. The long hugs. The inside jokes. The way they'd exchange looks during holidays like they shared some joke I wasn't part of. I chalked it up to family. Turns out, they were family in a different way. Let me rewind. A week after the article broke, I got a ping from a private investigator I'd quietly kept on retainer since the day she changed the locks. The man was old school, cigars, trench coat, probably still used a Rolodex. I dug into that flash drive again, he said. Found a few encrypted folders. Buried deep. Most people would have missed it. My pulse quickened. And he sent a photo. A hotel ledger. 2 names. One room. For nights. Chicago. March 14th to 17th. The names? Candace Calloway and Jared, redacted, my last name. My brother. I stared at it for a full minute. Not moving. Not thinking. Just breathing through it. No, I'm not a violent man. Never have been. My revenge? I keep it legal, quiet, and scalding. But this? This wasn't business. This was blood. I called him. Yo, he answered, like nothing was wrong. How's the Empire? Funny, I said. You'd know. You were in the lobby long enough. A pause. The kind of silence that says you're caught but haven't figured out how to spin it yet. Look, man, it's not what I laughed. Actually laughed. Oh no, Jared. Don't insult me with that line. You think this is about sex? About one more name in the pile. What then? It's about the fact that you smiled in my face for years while you were in bed with the two people who tried to erase me. One by one. And now? You're about to find out what it feels like to be invisible. He started stammering something, an apology? An excuse? A last-ditch confession? Didn't matter. Because I'd already activated the clause I had him co-sign on a shared investment we started 2 years ago. He didn't read the paperwork. Just wanted in on the returns. He didn't know the contract contained a morals clause. He didn't know I'd had our PI document everything. And he certainly didn't know that the moment I submitted proof of misconduct with a co-investor's spouse, he'd forfeit his share, an account worth over $2.3 million. You bastard, he whispered. No, I said. I'm the cleaner, remember? They thought they ended me. Fired me. Humiliated me. Locked me out, literally, emotionally, professionally. But what they never understood was this. You can't kill the foundation. You can crack the windows. You can strip the paint. But if I laid the bricks, I can build again. So I did. While the agency collapsed under scandal, while Candace ghosted interviews and Mason scrubbed his socials like it could bleach the truth, I got to work. I called in every favor I never cashed. Every tech partner I'd advised over the years. Every quiet founder I'd helped during my side gig consulting years. People they never saw. People who saw me. I didn't build a comeback. I built a future-proof artillery of innovation. A new firm. Lean. Agile. Unapologetic. We didn't brand ourselves as disruptive. We were the disruption. We poached 5 of her top-tier creatives. Not by force, by respect. Turns out, once the fear was gone, so was their loyalty to her. We didn't chase clients. Clients came to us. Because reputation travels faster than press releases, and mine? Well, let's just say a man who survives a public crucifixion and walks away cleaner than the nails gets noticed. I launched Black Tower Strategies. Names sound dramatic? Good. Because the world I left was run by cardboard kings and glitter glue queens. And I was done being polite. In 6 months, we were handling campaigns for fintech unicorns in 2 national brands. We didn't just advise. We architected. Meanwhile, her firm was bleeding. Quiet layoffs. Whispers of lawsuits. Candace took a sabbatical. And my ex-wife? She was seen pitching a proposal in a WeWork office, wearing the same heels she wore the day she fired me. And then came the gala. Industry event of the year. Sponsored by 3 of the clients I now represented. And held in the same venue where, 2 years ago, she stood at the podium and called me her anchor. Funny. Anchors don't sink. Ships do. I showed up clean-shaven, suited in black on black, no tie. Subtle power. Understated dominance. I didn't make a scene. Didn't walk in with fireworks. I just existed and let my presence be the reckoning. She spotted me across the room. Paused mid-conversation. Then the stare. Not angry. Not desperate. Empty. Because this was the moment she realized. I didn't want her back. I didn't want revenge anymore. I'd already won. I nodded once. She didn't return it. She turned away. Back to her dying brand, her shrinking circle, and a name now whispered in past tense. 6 weeks after the gala, I got the call. Offers accepted, said Elizabeth, my attorney, barely hiding the grin in her voice. I was sitting in my office, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city I now own corner by corner, and sipping a bourbon that cost more than my first car. Final number? I asked. She told me. I leaned back, smiled slow. It wasn't about the money. It never had been. It was about the signature at the bottom of the contract. Her signature. Let me explain. When I left her agency, it was worth $20 million on paper. Mostly hype, shallow clients, influencer fluff. But once the scandals hit, once I took the talent, once I shredded the myth she wrapped herself in, its value cratered. Investors pulled out. Vendors refused payment terms. Her brand, the name she plastered across decks, panels, business cards, boutique shopping bags, was now liability, not asset. And she needed a bailout. Guess who her silent buyer turned out to be? Black Tower Holdings, one of my shell corporations. She signed it thinking she was offloading a toxic brand and salvaging her pride. But what she actually signed was her name. Because the brand wasn't just hers. It was hers and mine. And when she fired me, she unknowingly forfeited the one clause I buried years ago. In the event of managerial exit, the naming rights revert to the remaining founder. She never read the subclauses. She never cared. She just wanted to play boss and burn the details. Now her name, Callaway, was mine. The agency once called Callaway Collective, now officially rebranded as Callaway, a Black Tower division. She found out the day the signage changed. I made sure it went up while she was attending a panel on rebuilding after professional setbacks. Fitting. She walked past the office she once owned and saw her name above the door again. Only now, it didn't open for her. She wasn't on the security list. She didn't have a key card. She stood outside, frozen, staring. And that's when I stepped out. Not to gloat, not to provoke, just to exist, at the center of everything she tried to erase me from. She opened her mouth, then shut it again. I nodded once, just like I did at the gala. And I said 4 words. Thanks for the foundation. Then I walked past her, into the building bearing her name, under my control. There's something funny about rebuilding your life after betrayal. You realize the house was never the prize. It's who you share the walls with. And more importantly, who you keep safe inside them. For me, that was Sophia, my daughter, 9 years old. Brilliant, observant, quiet in ways her mother never understood, but I did. Because when the noise fades, quiet doesn't mean weak. It means she's watching, learning, storing everything for later. She didn't cry when the locks were changed. She didn't panic when I didn't come home. She simply looked up from her sketch pad the next time I saw her, 1 week later, during my first court-approved visitation, and asked, "Are you coming back?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Why did mommy say you were busy?" She asked the only question that mattered. "Are you coming back?" And I told her the truth. "No, kiddo, I'm not going back there. But I'll build you something better." She didn't say anything. She just nodded once and held my hand tighter. It became our ritual, every other weekend. Ice cream in the winter. Midnight pancakes in the summer. We built castles in the living room, watched documentaries about whales and quantum physics, and I taught her how to hold a wrench and a paintbrush with equal reverence. I didn't badmouth her mother. I didn't weaponize her like Candace once tried to. I simply showed up, every single time. And slowly, her questions changed. From, "Are you coming back?" to, "Can I stay longer?" Then to, "Do I have to go?" And finally, "Can I live with you?" When the custody hearing came, I had everything ready. The new house, a school transfer offer, letters from teachers, counselors, neighbors, even Sophia's drawings, pages of them. All of them showed 2 houses. One was dark, messy, full of noise. The other was quiet, peaceful, safe. The judge saw the truth. Didn't need shouting. Didn't need slander. Just evidence. And a child's clarity. Joint custody became primary custody, just like that. And when Sophia walked into my house for the first time as her home, she paused in the doorway, dropped her little bag, and whispered, "It smells like you." I knelt down, met her eyes. "Because it's built for you." She sleeps in the room I built with my own hands. Hand-painted stars on the ceiling. A desk that looks out over the skyline, my skyline. And a journal on her nightstand where she writes every night. She asked me once if she could take my last name. I didn't hesitate. "Yes, when you're ready." She nodded. And later, I found her writing it in the back of her journal. Sophia Callaway Gray. My name. Her legacy. Ours. It started with a knock. 3 taps. Firm. Familiar. I opened the door expecting a courier, maybe a neighbor with mis-delivered mail. Instead, I found Eric Daly, my old partner from the very first business I built, back before Callaway even had a logo. He looked older, leaner, the kind of tired that doesn't come from bad sleep, but from carrying too many what-ifs. "I heard about everything," he said. "Funny," I replied, "so did half the city." He chuckled, awkward, unsteady. "I'm not here for gossip. I'm here because I think I screwed up." I let him in, against my better judgment. Eric and I had started in a co-working space barely big enough to hold 2 desks and a coffee maker. We split everything: the rent, the wins, the failures. He had vision. I had structure. Together, we made a hell of a team until he sold his share to a venture group for quick cash. Didn't even tell me until the ink dried. I was scared, he said now, staring into his untouched coffee. You were building something real. I wasn't ready. So I bailed. I thought maybe I could come back. I looked at him hard. Not with anger. With recognition. Because once upon a time, I was almost him. Before the betrayal, before the fire, before I stopped apologizing for being meticulous, for wanting control, for demanding more. I don't need partners, I said. He winced. I figured. But I do need contractors. He blinked. Wait. What? I slid a file across the table. A consulting contract. One time. Fixed rate. Tough job. High reward. You'll get one shot, I said. No equity. No handshake deals. You perform, we talk. He studied the terms. And then, he did something I didn't expect. He smiled. Not the grin he used to wear when we got a new client. Not the forced one he wore when he sold me out. No, this one was different. It was relief. Gratitude. Maybe even a little shame. I don't deserve this, he said. No. I replied, you don't. But sometimes, redemption doesn't care what we deserve. It cares what we do next. He signed. And for the first time in a long time, I saw a version of myself before the scars. Before the cold precision. Before I learned that trust is only valuable when it's earned again. When the dust settled and the headlines faded, there was one name that stayed oddly quiet. Not my ex-wife. Not Mason. Not even Jared. Candace Calloway. The co-founder. The whisperer. The mastermind behind the downsizing phone call. The one who laughed while I was being erased in real time. The one who always stayed just far enough from the spotlight to avoid the heat, but close enough to shape the flame. For months after the acquisition, she was nowhere to be seen. No press. No panels. No Candace's Corner. LinkedIn articles she once spammed the industry with like confetti. I assumed she'd retreated. Maybe into some other brand. Maybe into silence. I underestimated her. Until I got the envelope. Hand-delivered. No return address. No label. Just my name, neatly written. Inside, a contract proposal. A competing agency. Foreign-backed. New funding. Flashy branding. And at the top, Executive Creative Chair, Candace Calloway. She wasn't gone. She was waiting. Letting my ex take the fall. Letting Mason and Jared soak up the scandal. Letting the noise die so she could come back clean, dressed in white, and holding a new vision. But what she didn't know was that I'd already bought her investor. 6 months ago. Quietly. Through a dummy LLC in Zurich. And the ink on the funding clause? It gave me final veto power over executive hires. So I called the real owner, an old hedge fund partner from my consulting days, and said, block it. 24 hours later, Candace's contract was shredded. No explanation. No appeal. Just a short, surgical email. We've decided to go in a different direction. 2 hours after that, I got her email. No subject line. No greeting. Just, you really don't forget anything, do you? And I replied with just 3 words. Never forgive. Never forget. That was her checkmate. No press. No explosion. Just silence. The same silence she once gifted me. Only this time, it was permanent. Because while she spent her years manipulating people, I spent mine building leverage. And the difference between noise and power? Power doesn't need to scream. I never believed in revenge for revenge's sake. That's messy, temporary, unsatisfying. But justice wrapped in subtlety? A reminder etched into stone, not shouted through headlines? That stays. After reclaiming the company, the assets, the narrative, after gaining custody of Sophia and watching every traitor lose their footing, I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt clarity. But clarity doesn't mean you forget. It means you build something that outlives the pain. So I built the monument. Not a literal statue, though the name caught on. It was a campaign, a brand campaign launched by Callaway/Black Tower, focused on resilience, reinvention, and rebuilding after betrayal. The centerpiece? An ad spot. Simple. Black and white. A man standing in front of a locked door. No narration. Just text on screen. They locked him out. He built something better. And now, the only key that matters is the one his daughter carries. The campaign exploded. Went viral for all the right reasons. Think pieces, TEDx talks, men and women writing in from all over. I live this. I am this. This helped me leave. It wasn't about her anymore. It wasn't even about me. It was about them, the ones who stayed quiet too long, the ones who got up anyway. The campaign closed with a single quote. No credit, no logo, just this. Don't get even. Get free. Then let the silence do the talking. You know where that line came from? Me. From the night I slept in my car outside a house I once paid for. The same house she thought I'd never move past. Weeks later, I got word through the grapevine. She saw the ad. Alone. Middle of the night. Someone said she cried. Someone else said she cursed. Doesn't matter. What matters is she understood that I didn't just survive her betrayal. I transformed it. And now, the name she tried to weaponize is healing people she'll never meet.